Hi, Gemini Sun and Rising. Welcome to your June 2023 Astro Update. It's Raina here. So, this is another jam-packed month. I was compiling the list of transits, and I'd call them more major transits, and there were quite a few of them. So, this is, I'm just going to go in order. Obviously, the sun as we enter the month is in your sign, so you should be feeling very energized, and a lot of you will have your birthdays in June. I picked Gemini first to do this forecast because it is your birthday month for most of the month. On the 3rd of the month, there's a full moon at 13 degrees of Sagittarius, which is your opposite sign. So, understanding the dynamics of relationships can come up in one way or the other. Sometimes with full moons, there is drama that is to be had. Sometimes there's discovery. When you are, even if it's in the midst of conflict, you have a clash with someone that is close to you, and they kind of spill their guts and they kind of explain to you why they've been acting the way that they have and why they feel the way that they do. So it can be something that's cathartic. At all full moons, we have to look at it from the standpoint of perhaps there is an ending, although I would say with this one, it's less likely. I don't know if my theory is correct, but it's at an early degree. It's at, 13 degrees. I was thinking, I was getting it confused with the date because the date is June 3rd, but actually it's 13 degrees, which is almost halfway through that sign of Sag. So, but the thing is, maybe it can go either ways. For some people, a full moon in the 7th house can actually be that you are surrendering to commitment, that maybe you've had resistance about it and you finally have surrendered to it. So it can have that sense of liberation. Geminis are hard to pin down and therefore hard for Geminis to commit. Not all Geminis, that's kind of a broad brush statement, but some Geminis, might have a lot of Cancer placements in their inner points, and they are more emotionally desirous of like a committed relationship. So on the 5th of the month, Venus goes into Leo, and this is a friendly angle to you called a sextile, and it is in the 3rd house that you rule. So Venus in the 3rd house can actually be falling in love with someone you meet in your local area or a neighbor. Maybe you go to a barbecue and you meet someone that you have some kind of like romantic attraction to. Venus in the 3rd house can be money that is earned through websites or through, social media, through writing projects. There can be harmony with siblings, harmony with neighbors. On the 11th, we have Pluto going back into Capricorn, as well as Mercury going back. Your ruler Mercury going into your sign. So in terms of Pluto, this is for you the 8th house. So Pluto has briefly been in the 9th house, which is the God house, and now it's going back into this 8th house. The 8th house can be shared resources. It can be other people's resources. Pluto can be death. I think there could be something with inheritance for sure, but it can be power struggles. So I was going to say with Venus going into your 3rd house that this could be money through siblings, maybe through inheritance. So an example would be, let's say that there was a will, there was some kind of inheritance, and for some reason you were given less money or just were left out, God forbid, and a sibling said this isn't fair, and they decided to give you an equal amount of money. This implies that there's something that is being revisited here. Also, the 8th house can be the house of transformation. So another thing that this can indicate, because the 8th and 9th houses, to me, really encompass the spiritual progress or progression. But sometimes, the 12th house can be part of that whole thing too. But if you have been taking any kind of spiritual courses, and like, for instance, I'll just use this as an example, is shamanism, which is kind of like an earth religion that is connected to, there's probably different versions of it based on the cultures that are the indigenous cultures might have different ways of structuring their teachings and things like that. But I think you can boil it down to transformation, self-healing, and things of that nature, and helping others to do so as well. Now, there may have been something where you were kind of going back and forth between this organized pattern and the more self-study, or I don't know how I would put it, more open-ended. Because I would think the 8th house as well as the 12th house is more open-ended, more of the mystical experiences. The 9th house to me is more of the organized religions. And that can even include Eastern religions and Hinduism, the yogic traditions, which have their own set of dogma as well. But there's some benefit to that, because sometimes when we are really kind of expanding our spiritual territory, it's helpful to have these guideposts before we just delve into doing things on our own, because it gives us a sense of structure. And trying to just be eclectic in our path from the beginning may prove to be overwhelming. So all of that can be sorted out eventually. It's just about revisiting that. Pluto will go back into Capricorn in 2024 for a bit. Pluto retrogrades for 5 months out of the year. So once November of 2024 rolls around, Pluto will be in Aquarius for 20 years. So that 9th house will be featured very prominently for you for the next couple of decades. And this is the house of your opposite sign of Sagittarius, the 9th house. And it's all about expansion. So these issues, whether it is academia for the intellectual mind, whether it's long distance travel for the adventure in you, whether it is, like I said before, the organized religion or the philosophical framework that you have constructed to guide your life, to inform your life, all of these can come into play. So also on that date, on the 11th, Mercury goes into Gemini, into your sign. Because it's your ruler, this carries extra weight, and it certainly can make you feel like you're in your own element, which you are. And I always feel, people don't really talk too much about Mercury being in their own sign, but I feel like it's very helpful when you're trying to promote yourself in some way, because you can really communicate who you are. Now, of course, that's not your ultimate self. It's just you in this lifetime. But if you're being asked those stupid questions on job interviews that are gotcha questions, as far as I'm concerned, I mentioned that one time they were interviewing, having a job fair, and they asked, though I can't stand it when they say things like, "What do you think your biggest weakness is?" So I said, I'm too idealistic. I just get so disappointed when other people don't measure up to my, moral standards. And the two recruiters looked at each other and they kind of smirked because they probably had gotten that one before. But it's like, it's really, I mean, I'm kind of just being opinionated and getting off the point of this, but it really, sometimes it's so degrading what you have to go through if you are looking for a job and not creating one yourself. And this is before I created my own business. And so, I went on a lot of job interviews like that where you kind of are put in that sort of, no man's land or impossible position. And it's like, why? Why do people do that to people who just want a job? It must be some kind of way to break them or something. I don't know. I know I probably have a negative view on it, but anyway, you would be able to come up with something very clever if you were in that position. But even if you're like looking for love or what have you, this is great because you can let people know what you're all about. And also, I should have said when Venus goes into that third house, you might be doing online dating. The third house can be social media. So even these sites that connect people, that could be going on. On the 17th, Saturn goes retrograde at 7 degrees of, I didn't put it here, but it was Pisces. So this is actually your 10th house of career. And what could this possibly mean for you? Well, Saturn in your 10th house is a time when a person is not afraid to kind of work for their success. And what I mean by that is I've been, listening to these manifestation videos. And one of the things that they were talking about is the magnetic energy, which is the feminine energy, versus the masculine, which is the electric. And the electric energy is about, working hard, which is something that most people believe is their path to success. And sometimes, it may be indicated to do something like that, like really kick some ass in terms of like paving the way for something that you're trying to achieve. So maybe you're working long hours. But the problem is when people do this as uh, their, default method of getting ahead. And they're not willing to be magnetic, which means that it's the art of allowing, which I think is part of the law of attraction, where you're allowing things to come to you, to be drawn to you. When you put too much of that effort into something on a continual basis, it can lead to spinning your wheels, really, because you're not getting any results from all of your action. I have seen this firsthand. I mean, there's times when I've put out like a ton of videos and it's like, just crickets. And there are times when I'm not doing it and I'm like, what's going on? That magnetism, and you can do this without even trying, obviously. Sometimes when you're forcing things, you're creating this sense of resistance. And you're not allowing things to come to you. But again, it's both. It's not just one versus the other. So at this point, with Saturn retrograding, I think that this can be a time of easing up and seeing where you're at in the process. It's kind of like, it sounds to me kind of like the Seven of Pentacles in the tarot, where it's like you've put in this energy, this effort, and now you're waiting to see if it's going to, you're going to have a harvest. Because some people, they just keep doubling down and they still don't see that result, or they have like a very, minimal return for their efforts, and they think that they just need to do it even harder, and that's really not tuning in at a deeper level. So whenever you have a retrograde, it doesn't matter what planet it is, it's always going to be on the internal level. And some of these things too are like, is it worth it? And that's kind of what the Seven of Pentacles is about, because sometimes you do have to move on. You've tried and it's not working, and it doesn't mean that you completely abandon a goal or a dream, but you might have to tweak it, and maybe there's just some other thing that you need to do that is slightly different, and you will see this play out in the next several months. And sometimes this can make it so that you're not really that disciplined about things anymore. But that, if a person is really conscious about it, it's really that you're being guided to just ease up. It's not really that, oh, you've just lost your mojo, but you're kind of now going into that more receptive phase. That's how I see it anyway. On the 18th, we have, because another thing too I want to say about Saturn in the 10th is that there's also Neptune there. So Neptune and Neptune has been here for 11 years for you. Of course, that's not true. That depends on your particular chart, but I'm pretending that everybody's midheaven is 0 degrees of Pisces. So the thing is, it's been there for years. And for some Gemini people, this may be very, well, I don't know. I was going to say this can be very upsetting, because you might feel like you are kind of drifting around. But truth be told, Gemini tends to have their fingers in different pies. Unless you have like the moon in Capricorn, that might really bother you that you have Neptune in the 10th, because you might feel like you can't define your goals. And for some of you, this may be a time when a spiritual career is beckoning you, and you may be kind of pushing it back. So I'm trying to think here. Yeah, because, I'm talking about Pluto having been in your 8th house, and this is the healer. This is the shadow work, and this is getting, and Gemini kind of wants to stay above the fray. You don't want to get I was going to say get your hands dirty, but it's really get your consciousness dirty, or your emotions. You're having to excavate the shadow, which is the 8th house, and so it could have been a very difficult time for you. I have my sun. I have my rising sign at late degree of Sag. So I have had Pluto in the 8th house for years, but I have the sun there in my natal chart. So I'm not afraid of the shadow. It doesn't scare me as a Sag, but for some Gemini people, this can be something that it's like, you're just like, no, thank you. But in another sense, for anyone who has wanted to become a psychologist or in that field, this might have been the time that you started exploring that. And with the 9th house and Pluto, that can take it to the academic level, because you have great analytical skills. Plus, since you are an air sign, you don't get bogged down in emotion. So that's actually a good thing. So I don't want to give this impression that you wouldn't be good at any of that stuff, because you probably would be very good at it. But yeah, so anyway, on the 18th, we have the new moon at 26 degrees of Gemini, your sign, a later degree. And so this is a new cycle for you, whether this is your sun sign or your ascendant. So really, don't be afraid to dream big, and ask for what it is that you want, and see how you can make it happen. Not just expecting Santa Claus to deliver it, but envisioning. I think in a way the word envisioning is better than what's the word that they use? Setting intentions, because you're really seeing it play out, like how the logistics of it. On the 21st, we have the summer solstice in the northern hemisphere. And of course, winter in Australia and other places in the southern hemisphere. This will be in my time zone in the United States. It will be at 9:57. This is when the sun goes into Cancer. 9:57 a.m. Central Standard Time. So if you're in Europe and places like that, it will be in the afternoon. In some places, it'll be the evening. And this is a power period, and it speaks to the pinnacle of the sun. I just, I'm recording this in May, and it just it really bothers me that the sun starts to fade after June 21st. It's like, I mean, come on. It hasn't, the summer has just begun, and now it's like the sun is like starting to dwindle. And really, in actuality, you can't see it significantly for a couple of months. All summer long, it will still seem pretty bright late at night, but it's just like, come on. But yeah, so that's happening. And I think I had this idea to really embrace the sunsets in May, the month before the summer solstice, to get that feel for the sun building up and not just kind of petering out. On the 26th, your ruler Mercury goes into Cancer. That's your second house of earned income. So you may, you already have the sun there. And I actually don't see anything about Mars. I wonder if Mars is already in Leo. Yeah, Mars is in Leo all month long. And that brings me to another point, because I mentioned that Venus goes into Leo earlier in the month, namely on the 5th of the month. And there's a Venus retrograde in July, and it's going to be in Leo, and Venus doesn't leave Leo. I mean, Venus doesn't go direct until September 3rd. So you can imagine it's going to be in Leo for several months. So keep that in mind, that it's in your third house all this month, but continuously until the fall. And for Mars is in Leo as well all month. But towards the end of the month, when Mercury goes into Cancer, it's in this place that has to do with money and possessions. And then on the 30th, Neptune goes retrograde in Pisces. So Neptune goes retrograde in that 10th house. Neptune retrograde can be a reality check. So this can be with career matters. You already have Saturn retrograding here. So you may definitely find that something that you thought was working is not, and you finally have to admit it to yourself. If you've been really trying to push something forward, And, it's not about throwing in the towel. It's really about seeing things as they truly are. And that ultimately will, lead you to the appropriate place for that you belong, because you might be in denial over something that you need to really face head on. Okay, well, that's what I have for you, Gemini. I hope that this resonated. And if you would like a private reading, I am promoting my double readings, my deep dive readings, which involve an hour of transits for the next 12 months, which is especially, um, apropos at the time of a solar return, your birthday, because it's a time when you're really looking to the future. So this can give you some of the themes of the upcoming year, solar year, and or based on your natal chart, and because if you are listening for your sun in Gemini, you have no idea. You may have no idea what your rising sign is, and all of this information is not necessarily going to, well, I know it probably will not be anything like this. And the natal chart is really the chart that is used for predictive purposes because it is constructed from your time of birth. So it's all about as far as I can see, it's really about the mundane, like the day-to-day events that are coming into your reality to influence you, and what you can do, how you can take advantage of them. And this reading also includes an hour of natal chart analysis, which is great for the evolution of a person, because I personally prefer looking at the natal chart and the patterns versus predictive astrology, because I feel like that's too open-ended, predictive astrology. We don't know if things will manifest in the way that we think they will. I mean, think about the shutdown. How many astrologers predicted that ahead of time? There was, somebody said, oh yeah, there was an astrologer who did, or what have you. But you would think it would be across the board that they would have told us, okay, this is going to happen. There's so many variables in life that who would have thunk it? So, and plus, I like the idea of doing for self, which is what, when we look at our chart and see our patterns, that we can change a course of action if we feel that we're kind of in a self-defeating pattern on a regular basis, rather than waiting for a particular transit, which is kind of, you know, iffy at best. It's kind of like, waiting for this outer influence when we can take charge of our own life. So anyway, that's what I have for you, and happy birthday to everybody, even those born in May, because I'm recording this before the sun has gone into Gemini. I hope that you enjoy this, and have a great month. Bye.